Okay, let's do it.
Hello, good morning to you. What do you like? What do you do? What do you do? Hey, it's Hadar. Today I'm going to share with you the ideal morning pronunciation practice. You want to think of it as a physical workout or a yoga practice that you do in the morning to get energized for the day, but also to build muscle. And this is exactly the same thing, but in this case, we're talking about the articulation organs. You want to do that in the morning to set yourself up for pronunciation success, but also to build the muscles of your articulation organs like the tongue and the lips and the jaw. Now, I recommend doing it every single day so you're more in control of the sounds that don't exist in your native language, but it's also going to help you sound more clear in your native language as
I'm
well.
going to be reading
You
that.
can do it in the morning, but you can also do it before going into a meeting or before having an important speaking gig. Okay, let's get started. But before that, if you are new to my channel, then hi and welcome. And this is the place for you if you want to speak English with clarity, with confidence, and freedom. So be sure to subscribe and click the bell to get notifications so you don't miss out on any valuable lesson. Let's begin with massaging your jaw. It's always good to become aware and kind of relax all unnecessary tension. We're going to start with that and end with that. There is a muscle here at the jaw hinge that connects between the upper jaw and the lower jaw, and usually we hold a lot of tension there. So I want you to massage it and kind of like try to release all the tension and maybe hum. We're also warming up the voice, so you don't have that morning voice. And here, the cheeks. And again, the jaw. Maybe move it around a little bit with your hands. More. Good. Now we're going to warm up the tongue. Let's begin by sticking the tongue out. And we're going to move it to the right and then to the left. To the right. We're going to do this 10 times. Okay, so right, right, left. Okay, now we're going to stick the tongue out and bring it up and down. So stick it out and keep doing it. I'm going to keep speaking again. Push it out as if the tongue wants to come out of your mouth. 2 more. Very good. Now let's stick it out and bring it back in really fast 10 times. As far as you can. Okay, good. Let's release tension and blow your lips out. Okay, good. In the next exercise, we are going to clean the teeth with your tongue. So you want to move your tongue around. Keep doing it. Now, this is a really good exercise, especially before a meeting, so you make sure that you don't have green stuff or poppy seeds stuck between your teeth. I got you covered. Keep your lips closed. Good. Relax your lips. Good. Now we're going to use the tongue to massage the inside of the cheek as you're resisting the tongue with your cheek muscles. So, take your tongue, the tip of the tongue, and push it against the inside of your left cheek while the cheek is actually resisting it. So you want to push against. You want your tongue to feel like it's fighting something as you're massaging it. And get to all the different places inside your mouth. And to the right. a trill to relax the tongue. For some of you, this is going to be really easy if you have the trilled R in your language. If you don't, you can just do another lip trill. And now we're going to do it while going up and down in pitch. Massage the jaw a bit more. Very, very good. You're starting to feel your mouth, to feel the tongue, which is good because we need the tongue to articulate the sounds, and to be able to do it clearly, we need to be in control of the tongue. Now we're going to warm up the lips. So push the lips forward as if you're pushing it for a kiss, an exaggerated one, and pull it to the sides. Forward. Now try to keep the cheeks out of the way, right? You don't want to go like this. Okay, you don't want to get used to engaging your cheeks when pulling the lips. Sometimes we need that to articulate some of the sounds, like the E and the A, and we want to be able to control these muscles. So just the lips, the corners of the mouth, and forward. One more time. Okay, very good. Make sure you're not holding tension in your shoulders. If you do, just tell your shoulders to relax. Tell your face to relax. Okay, good. Now we're going to go into a few sounds. Let's start with the tip of the tongue consonants. Let's begin with the T sound. Ta, 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 ta. Make sure it's just the tip of the tongue touching the upper palate. Ta, 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 ta. Da, 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 da. Na, 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 na. La, 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 la. Let's do it together. Ta, 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 ta. Da, 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 da. Make sure it's light. Na, 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 na. La, 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 la. Ta, 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 ta. Da, 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 da. Na, 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 na. La, 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 la. And now we're going to move the tongue back a bit and switch between S and Z. Now we're going to move on to consonants created with the lips. We're going to start with a P sound where you bring the lips together and release air. P, 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 P. And then the voiced version of it. B, 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 B. And then we're going to go to the nasal version of it. M, 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 M. P, 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 P. B, 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 B. M, 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 M. Again. P, 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 P. B, 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 B. Let's add vowels to it. And we're going to use the consonant M. My. My. So we're going into an I diphthong. You want to drop your jaw and then raise the tongue for an E sound. My. And then we're going to go into may. Okay? Now we're going into the A as in day diphthong, starting with an E, shifting into an E. May. Then we're going to do a long O as in go. Mo. Good. The next diphthong is going to be moy. Oi as in toy. Moy. And finally, we're going to use the ow diphthong. Mow. Just like in mouse. Mow. So we're going to do all 5 of them, one after the other. My, may, mo, moy, mow. Let's do it again. My, may, mo, moy, mow. One last time. My, may, mo, moy, mow. Very good. Now we're going to move to the back of the mouth, pronouncing the k and g. From there, I want you to shift to the high E sound. G. G. So the tongue pulls back for the G, and then forward for the high E. G. And then K. Good. So let's do it a few times. G. And then from there, we're going to move on to the tense oo sound, a back open vowel sound. Goo. Make sure you push the lips forward for the oo sound. Let's do it 2 more times. Very good. And now I want you to yawn. Kind of like raise the soft palate by yawning. Good. And let's find the voice and bring the voice to the chest. Hello, good morning. Hello, good morning. So you want to bring your voice to the chest. Hello, good morning to you. Hello, good morning to you. And then let's bring the voice to the head. Hello, good morning to you. Hello, good morning to you. You want to feel the vibrations here? And maybe a little bit to your nose. Hello, good morning to you. Hello, good morning to you. Okay, let's move on to some tongue twisters. Let's start with my favorite, unique New York. Let's do it again. Unique, high oo, high e, unique New York. Let's say it again a little faster. Unique New York. Now, as you're moving through the days, if you do it every single day, you'll see that it's a lot easier for you to say it faster. The next one is good blood, bad blood. Good blood, bad blood. The good has that back open as in book, cook, and look. And the blood has a cup sound. Good blood. I hope you can hear the difference. Bad blood. Here we have the as in cat forward, front vowel. Bad blood. Good blood, 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 bad blood. The next one is tragedy, strategy. Tragedy, strategy. Strategy. Tragedy, 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 strategy. Good. I used to confuse this one all of the time. Let's do some TH warm-ups. So let's start with just sticking the tongue out and pronouncing a voiced TH versus a voiceless TH. Now we're going to work on transitions. N to TH. L to TH. You can also use the voiceless TH. Very good. And now STH. Make sure you stick the tongue out. The tongue is not too tight against the teeth, so the air comes out. Let's do it a few more times. Very good. Relax your lips. Release air. And massage your jaw again. Good. Very good. Finally, let's do some chunks. What do you? 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 What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? What do you like? What do you like? What do you like? What do you like? What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? What do you say? What do you say? What do you say? What do you say? Next one is going to go. Gonna 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 go. I'm gonna go, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna go. She's gonna go, she's gonna go, she's gonna go, she's gonna go. I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna go to the office, I'm gonna go to the office, I'm gonna go to the office, I'm gonna go to the office. Next one is could have. Could have, coulda, coulda, coulda. Coulda, 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 coulda. Notice that the D is really, really light. It sounds like a flat T, like a ra, like an R in Spanish. Ra, pero, coulda, coulda, coulda. I coulda, I coulda, I coulda. I coulda, I coulda, I coulda. I could have done that. I could have done that. I could have seen it. I could have seen it. I could have been there. I could have been there. I could have done it. I could have done it. I could have seen it. I could have seen it. I could have been there. I could have been there. Coulda, 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 coulda. Shoulda, 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 shoulda. Should have. Shoulda, 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 shoulda. Woulda, 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 woulda. Would have. Would have. Woulda, woulda, woulda. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. Okay, that's it. To wrap it up, I want you to put your palm on your belly, one on your belly, one on your chest, and try to breathe into the hand that is on the belly. And breathe out. Close your eyes. Breathe in to your belly, not to your chest, and breathe out. And last time, and as you exhale, you can also release a sound. Breathe into your belly. Okay, that's it. As I said in the beginning, I recommend doing it every single day. And when you do, you will feel the improvement and how easier it is for you to articulate sounds in English and in your native language as well. Now, to make it fun and to hold each other accountable, every time you complete this exercise, write in the comments, done. So we know that you did it again today. Have a
I'm going to be reading The Legend of the Swans. Chapter 1. I wonder if this is too loud. It was 7:30 in the morning. Shafts of yellow sunlight filtering through fine net curtains touched the pale face of the young woman who was asleep in the bed, and brought to life a faint sparkle of red in the ruffled mass of curling brown hair which was spread across the pillow. The bell of the alarm clock on the bedside table began to sound. It was a pleasant, mellifluous chiming, designed to make waking up a joy. It stopped, and music took its place, filling the room with gay noise, composed to make any sleeper want to bound out of bed to greet the April morning happily. Long brown eyelashes, which were spread out on the pale cheeks, fluttered and were raised to reveal the gleam of green-shot golden eyes. A long slim arm appeared from under the bedclothes, stretched out, and the music was turned off. With a groan, the young woman turned in bed, and embedded her head into the plump, soft pillow. The door of the room, which was partially opened, swayed slightly as a blue Persian kitten slid through it. The kitten paused in the doorway, his whiskers quivering. Suddenly, he yawned widely, revealing a tiny pink tongue and sharp white teeth. Gathering himself together, he sprang forward and landed on the bed. Purring loudly, he began to knead the bedclothes with his padded paws. The expression on his face was ecstatic, the eyes half closed, the black line of the mouth turned upwards at the corners. Georgina Mariette, known to her friends and relatives as Gina, opened her eyes properly this time, looked at the kitten, and then at the clock. Had she imagined hearing the alarm? She appeared at it. 7:35, April the 12th. Memory came surging back and she groaned again, not wishing to face up to it, trying to escape from the knowledge that Oliver was dead and that she was not married. Once more she buried her head in the pillow, as if by doing so she could forget. But the kitten continued with his kneading and his purring, knowing that if he did so, his owner would be forced to wake up properly. Listening to Blue's familiar purring, Gina kept her eyes stubbornly closed. In the back of her mind, she knew that she had set the alarm purposely last night to wake her early because today she was going for an interview for a job, and she wanted to spend the morning preparing her clothes so that she would look her best. But, as on every morning since she had received the news that Oliver Fox, her fiance, had been killed in a car crash, inertia claimed her. Of what use was it to get up and dress, to put on an act, to attempt to be interested in a job, when all she wanted was to die? The door was pushed open more widely, and a tall blonde girl, dressed in a blatant purple woolen suit, which she wore with a white high-necked sweater, entered the room carefully carrying a cup and saucer. Gilt bracelets jangled on her wrists, gilt chains swung between her firm breasts, and gilt earrings glinted wickedly amongst her blonde curls. An expression of concern marked her normally cheerful face as she glanced at the recumbent figure in the bed. Wakey, wakey, Gina, love. Here's a nice cup of tea. Remember, you're going for that interview. Make the most of yourself. Why not wear the new suit, the wheat-colored one? I'm not going, mumbled Gina from the depths of the pillow. Lynette Brown, affectionately known as Birdie on account of her first name, looked troubled. But Gina, it'll do you good to go out. Remember what Dr. Lambert said? You must have a change. Go away from here. Make a complete break with the hospital and everything associated with Oliver. Only that way will you recover from the shock quickly. Still, Gina did not move. Only the back of her ruffled head was on show. Birdie, will you please do me a favor? She asked in a muffled voice. Of course I will, love, said the generous, kindly Birdie. Go to work now, said Gina flatly. Exasperation took the place of tender anxiety on Birdie's face. Oh, Gina, what am I going to do with you? She exclaimed. You don't have to do anything, replied Gina. I've got to work this out by myself. Thanks for the tea. Now, please leave me alone. All right, but I still think you should go for the interview. Don't forget, I'm giving a party tonight for Pam Harwood. Gina groaned. Must you? Yes, I must. I promised. And remember, it's Mrs. Chadwick's day for cleaning the flat. So you'll have to get up sometime. Leave the front door unlocked so that you can get in, muttered Gina. Bye. Bye, replied Bertie, and shrugging her shoulders helplessly, she left the room. Gina did not move. On the bedside table, the tea grew cold. Blue, the kitten, stopped kneading and curling round and round several times to make a warm spot. He settled down to have a snooze. The minutes ticked away. The shafts of sunlight grew stronger, and their angle altered slightly. The outer door of the flat opened, and a small woman entered the hallway, removed her coat, and hung it in a cupboard. She went into the kitchenette and clucked her tongue at the pile of dishes there. Then, humming to herself, she began to run water into the sink. In the bedroom, all was quiet except for the purring of the dozing kitten. Suddenly, the telephone on the bedside table rang persistently. The kitten sat up, eyes wide, ears twitching. The telephone continued to ring. Gina moaned, stretched out an arm, lifted the receiver, and, with her eyes still closed, murmured sleepily into the mouthpiece. Hello? Did I wake you up? The question was asked by a masculine voice with a lazy lilt to it. The voice was completely strange to Gina. Her eyes flew open and she sat up straight in bed. Who's speaking? She asked. Will Fox. I almost became your brother in law. I'd like to come and see you. The voice was crisp, now autocratic in tone. Oh, Mr. Fox, stuttered Gina, caught with her defenses down. That's nice of you, but I'm sorry, I'm not receiving visitors yet. I haven't been very well, and well, that's too bad. The voice interrupted her, rudely, Gina thought. I won't be this way again, and I'd like to see the girl Noel chose to be his mate. Also, I have something to suggest which might be of interest to you. Sure you won't change your mind about inviting me around? Mr. Fox, Gina began. Captain, he corrected curtly. Then, Captain Fox, I've said I'm sorry I can't see you, she said in a cool, clear voice. Oliver's death was a great shock to me. The doctor recommended rest, and then a complete change. He said I was to have nothing to do with anything or anyone connected with Oliver. That wasn't entirely true, but it was all she could think of on the spur of the moment. Besides, she added, I don't think you would gain anything by meeting me at present. There was silence at the other end of the line. She was just thinking that he had hung up or that they had been cut off when he spoke again, softly and yet clearly, almost as if he were beside her in the room and was whispering into her ear. I think you should let me be the judge of that, he said. I don't know what you mean, she stammered. I mean, I prefer to be the one who decides whether I shall gain anything by meeting you. He was crisp again. I could be at your flat in a few minutes. Oh, No, Mr. I mean Captain Fox. I couldn't possibly be ready to meet you. I don't want to come here. I I want to be left alone. I have no wish to see anyone. She became suddenly aware that the ringing tone was sounding in her ear. He had hung up on her. Gina set the receiver back on its rest and leaned against the pillows. The two patches of brilliant color glowed in her cheeks, fantastic blobs of red on her pale cheeks. When she glanced downwards, she saw her breast was rising and falling rapidly at her heartbeat faster than normally. Captain Fox. Captain William Fox. Captain of what? She tried to recall what Oliver had told her about his elder brother, but her mind was foggy on the subject. She could remember sending a wedding invitation to him, against Oliver's wishes. The address had been somewhere in the highlands of Scotland. He had replied, but she could not remember whether he had accepted or declined the invitation. Her forgetfulness acted as a spur. Before she realized it was she, before she realized it, before she realized it, she was out of bed and standing at a dressing table, searching through the papers in the top drawer. Small and slender, but with softly rounded seductive curves, her legs shapely below the hem of her short, diaphanous nightgown. Her brown hair cascading about her shoulders, she looked much younger than her 23 years and gave an initial impression of someone who was hopeless and vulnerable. The replies to the wedding invitations were not where she expected them to be. Then she remembered they were in a folder in the drawer of the bedside table. She patted over the shaggy orange carpet, gently chastising Blue, who had left the bed and was rubbing himself against her bare legs. She was leafing through the correspondence in the bar folder when there was a knock on the door. It struck Gina that Mrs. Chadwick was extraordinarily noisy that morning. Then she called to her to come in. Behind, behind her, the door opened and closed just as the letter from William Fox appeared. The name leaped out from the paper, bold and authoritative looking, just as Blue hissed and spat and jumped up onto the bedside table, knocking the cup of cold tea over and scattering letters, cup, and saucer to the floor. All right, Blue, scolded Gina, lifting the kitten from the floor. It's only Mrs. C. No, it isn't, said the masculine voice she had heard only a short time ago over the phone. It's me. Gina whirled round. Above the kitten's blue fur, her face was white. Her green gold eyes were shadowed, deeply sunk in their sockets, but they blazed with indignation as they met those of the man who leaned against the closed door of her room. Who let you in? She demanded. Big-shouldered and slim-hipped, he was built like a heavyweight boxer. His nose looked as if it had once been broken and reset, and a white, wicked-looking scar which could have been caused by a knife wound angled across one lean cheek. He wasn't handsome, with a suave regularity of feature, as Oliver had been, but neither was he ugly. His face suggested a rugged, rock-like personality, and she guessed he could be rough when he wanted. Mrs. Chadwick did. He replied with an urbanity which contradicted his looks. His light blue eyes, deep set under thick dark eyebrows, were busy taking in her appearance, making her feel very conscious of the brevity of her gown. She hugged Blue close to her as if for protection from that curious gaze. But the kitten objected to being detained, struggled free, and jumping down, went to hide under the bed. She had no right. How dare you come in here? Go away! The words came out with rapidity of machine gun fire as Gina, furious by now, clasped her arms across her bosom. He grinned, and his face changed miraculously. She was looking at a mischievous boy who would never take no for an answer. Surprise tactics have always been my specialty, he said calmly. I told her I was a close relative of yours, and that I'd come to see you to commiserate with you in your loss. We had quite a little chat together about you. You've sunk pretty low in her estimation. Gina was surprised. Oh? Why? You've been lying in bed until all hours, opting out. Gina discovered she was shaking. How dared Mrs. Chadwick discuss her with this rude man? She tried to object, only to find she was so angry she couldn't speak. So she just stood there by the bed, pale and trembling, as her unwanted visitor strode over to the dressing table and picked up the photograph of Oliver. He stared at it for a moment and then swung round to look at her. And how long have you been wallowing in self pity? He asked in easy conversational tones as he replaced the photograph. Her body stiffened, her head came up, and her eyes sparkled dangerously. You may not have realized it, Captain Fox, but the days of keeping a stiff upper lip are over. None of us have to pretend we're not hurt anymore, she retorted. The man I loved was killed 2 days before our wedding day. Is it any wonder I'm shocked and sorry for myself? In one stride, he was standing over her, his light eyes cold, his wide, expressive mouth curling into a sneer. It isn't any wonder Mrs. Chadwick is disappointed in you, he jeered. No spunk, she said. His glance shifted to the bedside table, and he reached out a hand to pick up the bottle of sleeping pills, which had been recommended by Dr. Lambert. He read the label, and his confused gaze came back to us. Is this the drug you use to help you escape from reality? He demanded, sternly. Anger was now an insistent throb beating through her mind, thrusting aside the tepidity which had claimed her body and mind for the past week. She longed to strike at this man who had invaded her room. Why? Even Oliver had never been in this room and had never seen her in such a disheveled state, and she had been engaged to a Marian. I don't take drugs, she flung at him icily, hands clenched by her sides, shoulders back. She stood up straight, no longer concerned about how she looked. Now, will you please go before I call the police? The sneer faded from his face and was replaced by the mischievous grin. He folded his arms across his chest and rocked back and forth on his heels. Why do you want to call them? He asked mildly. You've invaded my privacy and I wish to dress, she retorted haughtily. Oh, is that all that's bothering you? He murmured, letting his glance rove again. His gaze come back to hers. Devilment was in his eyes now, blue and twinkling, dancing between soot black lashes. Go ahead. I can turn my back. It won't be the first time I've been present in a woman's room when she's not dressed. That I can't believe, she hissed, and reached blindly for the telephone receiver. Her hand never reached it because he caught and held her slim fingers in his much bigger hand. Furiously, she tried to twist them free, but shock and unhappiness had weakened her, and she was no match for his superior strength. Suddenly, very near to tears, she found herself leaning against him helplessly, rather appalled at her own violent behavior. I'll go from the room on one condition, he offered softly, and she felt his breath stirring her hair. Yes, she whispered. What is it? If you'll come into the other room when you're dressed and listen to a suggestion I have to make to you. The roughness had gone from his voice. It was kind, almost tender. She lifted her heavy eyelids and gazed up at his rock like jaw. It was difficult to believe that he was Oliver's brother. Oliver's hands had never grasped hers bruisingly like this. Oliver's mouth had been chiseled, almost perfect in shape. Above the rock-like jaw, this man's mouth was wide and curving, and the lower lip was full and sensual. Well, do you agree? He asked. Her glance went past his mouth, past the jutting, broken nose to his eyes. They were not the soft pansy blue of Oliver's, but the cold clear blue of ice-girt seas. And beyond them the craggy-lined forehead was framed by close clinging slightly curling hair, several shades darker than Oliver's had been, almost black. I agree, she submitted, thinking she had no alternative but to agree when held like this. That's better. He released her and left the room. Alone, Gina took several deep breaths, examined closely the marks left by his fingers on her wrist. Then she went over to her wardrobe and began to take out the clothes she intended to wear. She guessed that Oliver had told her very little about his elder brother because their relationship had not been a very close one. After all, there had been a difference of 8 years in their ages. Oliver had just celebrated his 27th birthday before he was killed, which meant that he which meant that the big brute in the next room was 35. He looked every day of it too, thought Gina waspishly, and then she wondered at her own strong feelings. She had not felt any strong emotion for days. Having chosen a pair of sleek wheat-colored pants and a matching Angora sweater to wear, she went off to the bathroom. For 15 minutes she soaked herself in the perfumed water. Then she dried herself in a leisurely fashion, trying all the time to recall anything that Oliver might have told her about his brother. If she remembered rightly, Oliver's father had been killed in some sort of accident when serving with the British Army. William had been 17 at the time and had followed in his family's tradition by joining the army, much against his mother's wishes. His mother had married again, choosing as her second husband a man who followed a much more peaceful profession, that of the law. When her younger son had shown an interest in medicine as a career, she had encouraged him. Gina had met Oliver and William's mother, now Mrs. Ann Simpson, and she had the utmost admiration for her calm, well organized attitude to life and her active participation in the various voluntary associations in the town of Leamington, where she lived. Oliver had studied medicine at Birmingham University, and it was while he was in his fifth and final year there, and she was in her third and final year at the local domestic science college that they had met. The only daughter of fairly wealthy parents, Jeanette did not really have to work, but she had always been interested in cooking and in household management. So her parents had thought the training would be useful to her. When she had qualified with honors in institutional management, she had gone to work in the hospital where Oliver had been working as a house surgeon. It was at that time she had left her parents' home and had moved into a Mews flat in the still elegant suburb of Edgbaston, which she shared with her old school friend Bertie. 6 months later, she and Oliver had become engaged. Quickly, plans had gone ahead for a wedding. It was to have been the spring wedding of the year between Oliver, son of the late Lieutenant Colonel Geoffrey Fox, and Mrs. Ann Simpson of Leamington, and Georgina, daughter of Mr. and Mrs. David Marriott of Handley in Arden. But it was to have been the only bridesmaid, and John Oldham was to have been best man. They were to have gone to Malta for their honeymoon, returning to live in a pleasant modern detached house in one of the better suburbs of Birmingham. Everything had been ready. She had given up her job at the hospital to spend the last week of her life as a single woman, preparing herself mentally and physically for marriage. Although there had been moments, terrifying moments, when she had wanted to escape from her commitment to Oliver and run as far away as possible, she had never admitted those moments to anyone. Then the blow had fallen. Returning by car from a rugby union game, which he had gone to see at Twickenham with some friends as his last fling as a bachelor, Oliver had been killed in one of the multiple crashes caused by fog on the motorway, and the dream of the perfect marriage had been shattered. Suddenly, the door of the bedroom was hit by the flat of someone's hand. It trembled, and Gina spun round from the dressing table mirror, fully expecting William Fox to march in, but the door didn't open. He merely called through it. Hurry up! I haven't got an all day to waste waiting for you to tivit, titivate. Grimacing at the door, Gina controlled a desire to throw something at it, and with an effort, she sang out sweetly, Coming! She turned back to the mirror, finished applying her lipstick, tilted her head this way and that to survey the way she had arranged her hair, high on her head in a smooth chignon, with a few corkscrew curls dangling tantalizingly in front of her ears. Then, satisfied that she looked cool and sophisticated, she opened the door, went down the passage, and made what she hoped was a stunning entrance into the living room. The effort was wasted. The living room was empty. From the kitchenette came the most delicious smell of bacon and eggs cooking, mingled with the aroma of percolating, percolating coffee. Gina's stomach gurgled noisily. She hadn't eaten properly for days, and now she felt ravenously hungry. Surely Mrs. Chadwick wasn't cooking breakfast. She wasn't paid to cook, just to clean. Quickly, Gina crossed the room to the door leading to the kitchen. She looked around it. William Fox, seeming much bigger because of the smallness of the room, was standing by the cooker. His shabby tweed jacket was off. The collar of his jacket, Vayella shirt, was undone, and its tail was half in and half out of the waistband of his thick army pants. His tie was dangling over the back of one of the kitchen chairs. "What do you think you're doing?" demanded Gina, in her most supercilious tones. He glanced around. "Cooking breakfast. Want some?" he asked, genially. "I've set a place for you," working on the theory that the smell of someone else's bacon cooking always makes me feel hungry. And so the same might apply to you. He opened the oven door, took out two plates which had been warming, and, expertly, scooped bacon and eggs from the frying pan onto them. "You have no right," Gina started, then changed her mind and exclaimed, "Where's Mrs. Chadwick?" "I sent her home. Told her to come back on Monday." "I hope you don't mind." "Mind?" Gina discovered she was shrinking in a most unbecoming shrewish fashion. "Of course I mind. She hasn't finished cleaning yet, and she won't be able to come on Monday because she works for someone else then." "Well, you're doing nothing these days, so it won't take you long to make the beds, vacuum, and flutter dust about," he replied easily, setting the plates on the table. "There you are. Eat up," he ordered. "How do you like your coffee? Black or white?" "I don't. I prefer tea," she seethed. "Ah, well, chacun or some gout. You'll have to make the tea yourself." He sat down on one of the spindly kitchen chairs, and Gina wished quite viciously that it would disintegrate beneath his weight, and laid him on the floor. "Come on, George," he invited. "Sit down and be friendly." She sat down and tried not to be interested in the food. He cocked a dark eyebrow at her, pursed his lips, and gave a wolf whistle. "My mother told me you were beautiful," he murmured, but I didn't believe her because she had always had a tendency to exaggerate about anything connected with Noel. He was her blue-eyed boy, and he always had to have the best of everything, even if, in actual fact, he didn't always choose the best. This time, however, I'm willing to concede she's right. He really picked a winner in you when it came to looks. You are beautiful, or you will be when you've muttered a bit more. That outfit you're wearing is the latest, I suppose. His grin flickered wickedly. "I must say I prefer you in a nightie. Are you sure you won't have the some? Are you sure you won't have some coffee?" Captain Captain Fox, began Gina, speaking through gritted teeth. I shan't object if you call me Will, George. He put in generously. My name isn't George, she flared, goaded beyond endurance and stamping her foot on the floor. Tut, tut, what a temper, he reproved her. You'll feel much better when you've eaten. Then we'll talk for a while. Then we'll go out. I thought we'd go for a drive somewhere. I'd like to go to Stratford. I've never been there. Later, we could have dinner together at some country pub. By then, I think we'll know each other pretty well. Don't you, George? I have no wish to know you any better, she replied coolly. Picking up her knife and fork, she began to attack the food which she could resist no longer. He stared at her bent head with narrowed, observant eyes, picked up the coffee pot, and poured coffee into the second cup. He pushed the cup and saucer across the bar. 56 minutes. Georgina's a heck of a name, he remarked. What did Noel call you? If by Noel you mean Oliver, he called me Gina like everyone else does, she replied haughtily. He made a face at her. Nah, I prefer George, he said. I don't really care what you prefer since I have no desire to be acquainted with you any further, she said, sulkily, wondering how she could get rid of him. You may not have any desire to be, but you're going to be. I need a woman. Her head came up in shocked reaction to this blatant statement, and he grinned at her. One who can cook for large numbers of people and knows how to cater for them. He continued easily, although his eyes twinkled with devilment again, in acknowledgment of her shocked reaction. Looking down at her surprisingly empty plate, Gina wondered what he had in mind, but told herself that she wasn't going to show the slightest interest. Aren't you going to ask me why I need a woman who can cook? He prodded. Slowly, she raised her eyelids to give him a bored glance from under her long lashes. He groaned again knowingly and pushed his empty plate aside. Devastating. I bet you have practiced that for years, he murmured mockingly, and to her annoyance, blood rushed to her cheeks. He leaned across the table and brushed a long forefinger down her cheek. Now that is real and gives me hope, he commented. Your mother tells me you cook very well. My mother? She exclaimed. Yes, I called to see her. She gave me your address and phone number. Why do you need a cook? She asked. You cook very well. He inclined his head in mock appreciation of the compliment. Grudgingly admitted, but at least you admitted it, he said. Have some more coffee while I tell you why. Meekly, Gina passed her cup. It was the best coffee she had ever tasted. Soon after I left the army, he explained. It's good sheep country, and I already have a sizable flock. There are fertile fields and the possibility of rearing some dairy cattle. One day it occurred to me I could share the beauty and peace of the place with others and make a little money on the side. I decided to run an adventure camp for young people of both sexes. I ran into an old friend from my army days who was very interested in the scheme. Last summer, we organized our first two camps. They were a great success, but from the point of view of some of the parents of their youngsters attending, they had one drawback. What was that? Um, there was no woman on the premises. Oh, I understand, said Gina. Couldn't you or your partner get married? Hmm, he did, last November, and we thought our problem was solved, he said dryly. His wife was very enthusiastic at first. She had been a social worker in a slum district of Glasgow, and she thought up the idea of having groups of poorer youngsters to come to the camps. We decided to run one for them this Easter. Now, Madge is expecting a child and can't cope. 20 youngsters are due to arrive next week, and we need someone to cook for them. Aren't there any local women willing to help? No. You see, the place is situated on the shores of a sea, loch, which is practically inaccessible from the landward side. There's no electricity. Cooking is done by Keller gas, which I haul in myself from Ullapool. Not many women these days are willing to put up with such conditions. I have interviewed a few, and once they've learned that there's no electricity, they've refused. Not many of them have measured up to my standards either. He added, cynically, "Why don't you get married?" she asked, curiously. His face turned to stone and his eyes went blank. "What makes you think that having a woman or a wife solves anything?" he retorted coldly. "I tried marriage once. It didn't work." Gina raised her eyebrows. He met her glance squarely and smiled. "I'm not going into details," he murmured. "Now, when your mother told me that you trained in institutional management and that the doctor had prescribed a complete change of scene for you to recover from the shock of Noel's death, I thought that you might be interested in it and possibly suitable for the job. That's why I had to see you." He paused and glanced around the pretty kitchenette. Then he looked at her, his keen glance taking in the smooth crown of burnished brown hair, the smoothly applied makeup, the close-fitting expensive sweater, and the fine white hands holding the coffee cup, and his white mouth curled jeeringly. "But now that I've seen you in your nice cozy little nest, I realize I'm off center," he said. "You're the kitten soft kind of woman who likes comfort, who likes to be adored and waited on, and who likes to be loaded with worldly goods. You're loaded too, aren't you? With money. I suppose that's why Noel wanted to marry you. I dare say you were going into marriage with a handsome annuity behind you, bestowed on you by your old man." Gina's fingers gripped the coffee cup. She longed to hurl it at him. His jeers pricked her pride and stabbed painfully at the vulnerable romantic heart she hid beneath her sophistication. It was just possible that Wolf Fox had hit the mark more closely than she wanted to admit. "Oliver loved me," she retorted, "and I loved him. He would never have wanted to marry me for any other reason." Again he raised that infuriating right eyebrow at her. "You think not?" he queried. "Naive, aren't you?" Noel was like my mother, and she's one of the most charming people I've ever met, defended Gina. Charming, I grant you, but with an eye to the main chance, ambitious to the core. You should have seen what she did to my father because he refused to climb any higher in his career. She was the reason why he was always volunteering for jobs where there were no merit quotas. He said, his mouth curving cynically. But far be it from me to destroy your illusions about people. Would you come and cook at the spring camp? Gina's eyes weakened. Gina's eyes widened in bewilderment. But, but you've just said I'm not suitable. No, I didn't say that. I said that I didn't think you'd be interested in coming to the back of Beyond. Now that I've seen you in your setting. But I'm getting pretty desperate now. The boys are due to arrive next Monday. If you decide to come, you could travel with me tomorrow and stay until Mage can cope again. I expect she'd like to have company. I I'll think about it. Gina evaded the issue because it was surprisingly difficult to refuse. He sighed heavily. That means you're not interested. All right, think, and while you're thinking, we'll go to Stratford. Oh, no, I can't. I have an appointment to Warwick at 2 o'clock, said Gina, glad she had an excuse for retreating. An appointment for what? He demanded. A job. With the County Education Committee's school meal service. Then you can go there after we've been to Stratford, he replied, coolly. Do you have a car? Yes, a Triumph Sports. You would, he remarked dryly. A present from Daddy. I have no doubt. We'll go in that. I'm driving a small truck at the moment. Very useful. Home on the farm, but not really suitable for driving around the Warwickshire country lanes. Now, you go, make your bed, and I'll wash up and then we'll go. I, I started Gina, was not used to receiving orders. He stood up and began to gather the dishes together. Come on, George, look sharp. It's a lovely spring morning, and we're going to miss the best part of the day if you don't get a move on. By the way, who uses the other bedroom? My flatmate. Uh, Lynette. Oh, now there's a name I could like, he murmured. What's she like? Blonde, 5 feet 9 inches. I'm not sure of her other dimensions. She replied, Gina, with a touch of acidity. Acidity. Replied Gina with a touch of replied Gina with a touch of acidity. She was sure Buddy would like Wilfox. He has the physique and easy confident manner the blonde girl always admired in the opposite sex. What does she do for a living? Asked Will casually. She's the assistant buyer in the women's fashion department of a big department store. Why do you want to know? I'm just trying to find out what she's like, and whether she'd object to moving into your room while I use hers tonight. Do you think she would? Gina stood there with her mouth agape as the water swished into the sink. Captain Fox, it isn't a case of her objecting, she said at last. It's whether I object. This is not a lodging house, nor can it be commandeered as a billet for the army on the move. His grin flashed out, and he lifted his shoulders in a careless shrug. All right, don't get all upstage at the thought of another woman sharing your bed. I could have offered to share it with you instead, but I thought that would be presuming on our almost close relationship too far. If you don't like the idea, I'll sleep on the sofa, he said. You could sleep in a hotel, snapped Gina, and he gave her a glance of mock disapproval. Now, George, that isn't very hospitable of you. Your, your mother wouldn't approve. I slept in the spare room at your parents' home last night. Very comfortable too. Go and change your pants for a skirt, and bring a raincoat. There just might be a shower while we're out. There was nothing she could have done to prevent it from happening, thought Gina, defensively. When she sat in a car half an hour later and watched Will's hands on the steering wheel as he guided the vehicle skillfully through the traffic on the main road going south through the suburb of Solar Hill. Harking back to the conversation which had taken place at the flat, she realized she hadn't tried very hard. She had gone and changed into the skirt which went with the golden colored suit, and she had brought a raincoat, a scarlet one. The hood of the car was down, and the soft spring air lifted the curls at the sides of her face, making them swing. It was, as Will had said, a lovely day. With a strange with a strange shock of surprise, she noticed that the season had been working its magic in garden and on the countryside while she had been mopping in the flat. Mopping. That was exactly what she had been doing. And she would still be lying there in her bed, her eyes closed against the sunny day, wishing she could die. If this outrageous man had not come this morning and forced her to come with him. No, not forced. He hadn't done that, but it was difficult to describe what he had done. By a series of taunts and suggestions, he had made her leave the bed, get dressed, eat, and come out with him. What a misery she must have been during the past week. She had behaved like a spoiled child who had had her favorite playmate taken away from her. Not that she and Alpha had played much together. Theirs had been a serious courtship. I suited a young, ambitious doctor and the daughter of the managing director of an engineering company. Yes, Oliver had been very conventional, but his brother was not. Having now met Will, it was easy to understand why Oliver had talked so little about him. Understandable, too, was Mrs. Simpson's silence on the subject of her eldest son. He just did not fit in the comfortable middle class community in which Anne Simpson lived and moved. She would always have to she would always have to be explaining his odd behavior and comments to her neighbors, who might look askance at someone who preferred to live in a wild, inaccessible part of the country and who had tried marriage but had found it didn't work. What matrimonial tangle lay wondering what matrimonial tangle lay hidden behind it. She imagined wolf fox could be quite difficult to live with and would require a lot of loving. He would also be difficult and demanding to work for. She had said she would think about his suggestion that she should go and cook for his adventure camp more as a way to put him off than anything else, hoping he would leave the flat and go north without her. But he hadn't left, and it looked as if she was going to be settled with him for the rest of the day. So any refusal to his offer of a job would have to be made to his face, a task she didn't relish, as she was sure he wouldn't accept any excuse she made. By evening, it should be easier to give him a straight, flat refusal. She was sure she would be offered a job by the county education committee. Her references were excellent, and she had her father's influence behind her. Her mother, too, was well known. Yes, there was really no decision to make. It would be made for her that afternoon at the county offices, and later, safe and sound in the knowledge that she had a job, she would be able to send Will Fox on his way. Pleased with her thoughts, Gina relaxed in her seat. They had passed through her hometown of Henley in Arden, and were now speeding along the road to Stratford. The wooded slopes and neatly ploughed fields of the countryside were very familiar to her. Here she had often wandered as a child, and later as an adolescent searching the woods and of hedgerows for the wild flowers, so beloved by Shakespeare, who had wandered here himself, that he had scattered their names liberally throughout his plays. Violets, oxlips, woodbine, musk rose. Why do you want to go to Stratford? She asked Will. Although I was born in Leamington, I've never been to Stratford, he replied. I think it's time I went there, because I, wa- I was I was christened William Shakespeare. Gina exploded into spontaneous laughter. Anyone who looked less like the Bard of Avon than Will Fox was difficult to imagine. It was the first time she had laughed since Oliver had been killed. She didn't know the difference laughter made to her. It drove the serious, slightly superc- sup- supercilious expression from her face and turned her into a natural, fun-loving girl with sparkling eyes, rosy cheeks, and glinting white teeth, all of which her companion noticed with approval in his glance. Oh, no, she gasped. You'll be saying next that Oliver was named after Oliver Cromwell. He was. Ironic, isn't it? That I turned out to be the soldier, he said. Huh, he didn't tell me, she exclaimed. He wouldn't, he commented dryly. No more than I used to tell anyone my full name for fear of being laughed at. Now, I've reached the age when I don't care who laughs at me. Whose idea was it? Your mother's or your father's? I owe my name to my mother. She chose it in a rare moment of romanticism. You see, her maiden name was Hathaway, and that, combined with her Christian name of Anne, gave her ideas. She was never able to find a Will Shakespeare to marry, so she called me after him. I think at one time she had a hope that I might live up to the name and become a poet or a playwright. She soon lost that hope when it became very obvious that I was more interested in out of door activities than in reading or writing. My father, whose family had always had members in the British Army, retaliated when Noel was born by having him christened after his hero, Oliver Cromwell. Gina was laughing again. I wonder why he didn't tell me, she said, breath back. I suspect he went all out to make an impression on you. Probably mother told him not to tell you. He always tended to follow her advice. He didn't tell me much about you. Nor did your mother. For the same reason, I expect. They'd rather you didn't know about me. I've been a great disappointment to them. He replied cynically. Hmm, black sheep? She queried, and saw his crooked grin appear. Yeah, that's as good a description as any, he said non-committedly. Do you know Stratford well? Every nook and cranny. Hmm, I hoped he might, because I want to see all the places, and and Hathaway's cottage, the grammar school, Holy Trinity Church, Clopton Bridge, the theatre, the lot. Mhm. And his cottage is at Shottery, and it wasn't really hers. It was called Hewland Farm and belonged to her father. She was just born there. Then we shall go to Shottery too. Okay, let's see. Money, money. Stratford was busy, but not as crowded as it would be later in the year, when the hordes of visitors from overseas would cram into every hotel and guest house. Gina and Will visited the house on Henley Street where Will Shakespeare's father had lived, then lingered for a while in the old grammar school with its wooden beams and diamond paned windows. In the church, they stood in silent worship beneath the stone bust of the poet in the chancel. Soft light, color mottled, filtered through the stained glass windows, adding to the sense of peace and timelessness. It was peaceful too at Shottery. The cottage, built of mellow brick and timber and roofed with brown thatch, in that combination of various materials, which is a feature of Tudor houses, basked in the April sunlight. Daffodils danced in the garden, and birds twittered happily as they flew amongst the many trees and shrubs. Inside the kitchen, Gina and Will sat side by side on the narrow wooden settle on which, it is said, Anna Hathaway and Will Shakespeare had done their courting. It's more likely that they did their courting in the fields, to quote Shakespeare himself. Between the acres of the rye, said Gina, with a touch of dryness. You sound disapproving. What's wrong with courting in the fields in springtime? Asked Will, raising an eyebrow at her. Nothing, I suppose, she said, feeling the blood creep warmly into her cheeks as she encountered the knowing twinkle in his eyes. But I suspect he had to marry her because of the consequences of their courting. Hmm, poor Will, he murmured. If that was the case, he has my sympathy. Back in Stratford, they paused on the grey Clopton Bridge, which spans the River Avon. Once more side by side, they leaned on the old stone wall and watched two white swans glide down the stream. Then they drove out of the town to the theatre, finding its bulky 20th century structure very different from the Tudor buildings in which they had spent most of their time. There was no more time to linger. Leaving Stratford, they set out for Warwick. As they drove along country lanes whose hedges were beginning to burst into leaf, the sky clouded over and rain threatened. In the county town, the walls of the still inhabited castle loomed grey and formidable over the narrow thoroughfare. Will left Gina at the front door of the county council offices, saying he would come back for her in an hour. As he drove away, Gina felt suddenly cold and nervous. For the first time since Oliver had been killed, she was alone in the world outside her flat. The next step she would make her by herself. Suddenly, she realized how much she had enjoyed the time spent with Will in Stratford. She was surprised how much she had known about the place and its famous playwright, and how much she had enjoyed sharing that knowledge with Will. He had listened to her attentively, drawing out her knowledge with skillful, interested questions, and she had a feeling he had enjoyed the tour as much as she had. Pulling herself together, she told herself there was no need to be nervous. There would be several people on the interviewing committee whom she would know, and she was sure the interview would go easily. An hour and 10 minutes later, she emerged from the offices with an expression of bewilderment on her face. Across the road, she could see the Triumph parked. Will Shakespeare Fox was lounging behind the steering wheel. Gina crossed the road quickly and slid into the seat beside him. um, do you mind if we go back to Birmingham by the way of Henley in Arden? I must go and see my mother, she said, breathlessly. His eyes were shrewd as he slanted a glance at her. You don't get the job, he said. No, and I can't think why. Oh, for once the magic formula didn't work, he remarked dryly, as he started the car and eased it away from the curb. What magic formula? Asked Gina. The right surname, the right contacts, as well as the right qualifications, he replied, with a touch of sarcasm. I presume you have all those for this area, and yet they chose an experienced stranger. Yeah, they did. But how did you know? Fortunately, it happens all the time. Otherwise, the taxpayer might have good reason to complain, he remarked dryly. Then, more gently, as he noticed the expression of distress on her face, the job as cook for the spring camp is still open. Gina looked out at the fields and woods, blurred now as the rain became more than a threat. I'm still thinking about it, she said lamely. But it would have been much easier if the decision had been made for you by the offer of that job with the county, he joked. All right, think away. They reached Green Willows, her parents' house, just as the rain began to fall heavily. Gina left the car to run into the house, leaving Will to adjust the hood to keep the seats of the car dry. Her mother came to the door in answer to a ringing and regarded her with surprised brown eyes. Gina, how lovely! Oh, how much better you look! She exclaimed. She glanced past her daughter at the car. Who's with you? Oh, Will Fox, said Gina shortly, stepping into the hallway and removing her raincoat. Huh, he did call you then. I rather hoped he would. Such a pleasant man. We had a very jolly evening with him. Your father was most impressed by him. Mother, said Gina, interrupting the flow of her mother's words, which she knew from experience would go on forever if no one interrupted. I've just come from an interview for that job with the county education committee. I, I didn't get it. Dillis Marriott was a slightly bald, dark-haired Welsh woman. She wore a perpetually surprised expression on her fine-boned face. This expression did not alter as she turned to look at Gina, and it was difficult to guess whether she knew anything about the interview or not. Didn't you, dear? She said smoothly. Well, don't be too disappointed. It wouldn't have been much of a change for you. You'd have still been here in Warwickshire, near all the places you used to visit with Oliver. Will came in, closed the front door, and Mrs. Marriott went forward to meet him. How nice to see you again so soon, she said warmly. Let me take your raincoat. My goodness, you did get wet. It started off such a nice day. We're just going to have afternoon tea in the lounge. Come and join us. Then you'll both stay to dinner, of course. My father will want to see you, Gina dear. They followed her across the thick pile carpet and down two shallow steps into the big lounge, which was a long, low-ceilinged room with wide windows at each end looking out onto well-tended gardens. To Gina's surprise and secret horror, there were already several women in the lounge, all of them engaged all of them engaged in different forms of needlework. With a cold feeling of dismay, she stopped short and stared at them. They stopped talking and stared at her, and then beyond her at Will. We're sewing for the church bazaar, explained Mrs. Marriott. Then we'll go into the library, said Gina, desperately, in full retreat, wanting to escape from the curious sympathetic battery of eyes. No, of course not, said her mother firmly. They'll all be so pleased to see you and quite delighted to have Will to tea with them. Come along now, and I'll introduce you, Will. While Gina stood uncertainly, Dallas took Will by the arm and led him forward. He didn't seem at all ill at ease, although Gina suspected that inside he was laughing to himself. Reluctantly, her face burning, she followed in their wake. Nice to see you, Gina, boomed a voice on the left. Come and sit beside me and tell me what you have been doing with yourself, girl. She glanced sideways and recognized with relief the vice's sister, who had once been a teacher of gymnastics at the local grammar school. She sat down beside her and was immediately swamped with local news because the vice's sister didn't really want to hear about Gina Marriott, but required merely a receptive ear for her gossip. At 5 o'clock, the women were seen off by Tilly's, who lingered in the hall to speak to each one in turn. In the lounge, Gina took a biscuit from one of the plates and curled up on the big Chesterfield. She glanced at the broad back of the man who was standing in the window, embrasure looking out at the rain. Your behavior was exemplary, she said. How did you do it and not laugh? He swung round and came slowly towards her. Hands in his pockets, he stood over her. His mouth was grim, and his eyes were like blue flints. Gina shivered a little. If mine was exemplary, yours was disgraceful, he said softly. You deserve to be spanked, you spoiled little cat. He didn't tell her why she deserved to be spanked, because her mother came back into the room. Gina thought she had never been spoken to by anyone like that before, nor had she ever been spanked. And what was more, she couldn't think why he thought she deserved such treatment. As far as she knew, she had done nothing wrong. She'd sat beside Miss Barry and had listened to her ramblings, knowing she was safe there and wouldn't have to face up to the expressions of sympathy, which would have been her lot if she had spoken to any of the other women. In the half coma produced by the effort of pretending to listen to Miss Barry, she had been vaguely aware of Will handing round tea for her mother, passing plates of sandwiches and cakes, and generally making himself useful, as well as pleasant, much to her surprise. She had thought, judging by his behavior in the flat that morning, that he would have sat apart, silently ridiculing the bizarre lady's type of conversation, as Oliver would have done. But instead of doing that, he had joined in. Even now, he was helping her mother to remove the remains of the tea party, carrying out the laden tray and coming back for another. As he passed by the end of the Chesterfield, he glanced at her and ordered briskly, "Come on, George, look alive. There's plenty to do. Your mother isn't getting any younger, you know. In fact, she's just gone upstairs to have a rest before dinner." She blinked up at him. "But Mommy hardly ever rests." "Well, she's resting now. Her legs are aching," she says. "You and I are going to rinse the crockery and put it in the dishwasher and put away the food. And then you're going to cook the dinner, just to show me whether you're any good at it or not," he announced, calmly. "But Mrs. Brooks has the flu and isn't here today, nor has she been here all week. And it's time you stopped depending on the older generation to do your work for you. Now, are you going to move voluntarily, or am I going to make you?" He threatened, coming to stand over again. Gina moved, head held high. She went through to the kitchen and started on the dishes. He came to help her, and they worked in silence. Secretly worried about her mother, Gina worked quickly and efficiently, conscious all the time of waves of disapproval being relayed from Will to herself. She kept telling herself that she didn't care whether he approved of her behavior or not, and that he had no right to be so critical of her. But she could not help wondering whether he was right. And she was spoiled. As soon as the dishwasher was going and the food had been put away, she excused herself, saying she was going to see her mother to ask what was for dinner. Glancing at Will in her most supercilious manner, she suggested that he went to sit in the library or the lounge and to make himself at home until her father returned. Upstairs, her parents' bedroom was as it had always been, a pleasant, comfortable haven, a place to which she had scurried in the night as a child, disturbed by nightmares, to climb into the big bed beside her mother, knowing that she would be safe there. Phyllis was lying on the bed, idly turning the pages of a magazine. "Mummy, are your legs really aching?" asked Gina, approaching the bed. Phyllis glanced at her, an amused twinkle in her eyes. "Yes, they really are. So nice of you to offer to clear up after the tea party and to say you'd cook the dinner. Poor Mrs. Brooks isn't at all well. The flu left her with bronchitis." Gina opened her mouth to say that she hadn't offered to clear up or to make the dinner. Then she closed it again, and she realized the offer had been made on her behalf by that infuriating, interfering man downstairs. Then, remembering his criticism of her, she sat down on the side of the bed, fiddling with the gold charm bracelet which had been a 21st birthday present to her from Oliver. Mummy, would you say I'm spoiled? She asked suddenly. A little, yes. But it's natural for you to be. You are our only daughter, and perhaps your father and I have been easier with you than with the boys, and have given you most of the things you've asked for. You've been easy to spoil because you've always been so pretty and good natured. Why do you ask? Something which happened today made me wonder if I am. Not getting the job? Delicia's eyes were shrewd. Yes, but not only that. You see, when Wolfox made me go out with him, I realized for the first time since Oliver was killed how awful and miserable I had been, and how badly I've been treating everyone. You and Daddy and Bertie and Mrs. Simpson. You must have all been terribly fed up with me. No, dear, not fed up. None of us could ever be that. But we have been very concerned about you. I suppose I showed my concern to Will when he called to see us yesterday. Um, I thought it was nice of him to call. He had been to see his mother to give her his sympathy on the death of Oliver, and to explain why he wasn't able to arrive in time for the funeral. Apparently, the road where he lives was made impassable by the spring rains. It must be a very remote place. He did tell me its name, but I can never remember those Scottish names. It's somewhere in the Highlands, muttered Gina. Ah, that's right. And it's allowing it to be used by some organization for underprivileged youths over the Easter holidays. Very good of him, I thought. Anyway, he asked for your address and said he'd call you and try to persuade you to go for a drive somewhere. I'm glad he succeeded. You look so much better. Your cheeks are quite pink and your eyes are brighter. Persuasion. So that was William Fox's name for the tactics he had used that morning, thought Gina, suddenly indignant again. You like him better than you liked Oliver. She accused her mother. Delly's eyes Delly sighed and closed her eyes. Then, opening them, she looked rather pityingly at her only daughter, the child, on whom she had lavished so much of her love. She knew that Gina was innately shy and affectionate, yet she also knew that the young woman could be very stubborn at times. The stubbornness had shown itself particularly over the matter of her marriage to the punctili- punctilious, punctilious, ambitious Oliver. I didn't dislike Oliver, she explained slowly. I just thought I thought you should have waited longer before deciding to marry. After all, Gina, he was the only young man you'd ever known. You can't say that they've been queuing up to take you out over the years, can you? That was true. Although attractive to look at, Gina had not had any boyfriends because she was shy and she hid that shyness under a facade of sophistication, which had tended to frighten young men away. Only Oliver had persisted in getting to know her, and because of that persistence on his part, she had believed him to be in love with her and had consequently fallen in love with him. Oliver and I were ideally suited to each other. She defended shakily, tears springing to her eyes as they often did since Oliver had died. We liked the same things. We never quarreled. Our marriage would have been perfect. No marriage is ever that, murmured Tilly's. Not at the start, and at any rate. It might grow to perfection over the years as the partners learn what love is all about. Then, seeing that Gina was very upset, she patted her hand comfortingly. I just felt that sometimes Oliver's approach to you was rather calculated, and that your relationship seemed cut and dried, arid almost. No surprises, no excitement. There was nothing unpredictable about Oliver. You would always have known where you were with him, which might have led to dullness later. I suppose I'm an old fashioned romantic at heart, but I used to feel that you weren't in love with each other. At least, not in the way David and I were. And still are. There, we won't talk about it at. We, we won't talk about it anymore because I can see it's upsetting you. Will you stay the night? Michael will be home from Oxford for the weekend. He's bringing a college friend with him. Captain Fox is welcome to stay the night with us again. No, thank you. We won't stay, said Gina hurriedly. I promised Bertie that I'd help her with a party she's giving. I'll come down again tomorrow. I'll have to start looking for another job. Hmm. Have you, have you anything in mind? No, I was so sure I'd get the job with the county. Of course, I could take the jobs that Will Fox has offered me. What is that? He needs a cook for the spring camp. Uh, his partner's wife is expecting her first baby soon and can't manage very well. I have a feeling he doesn't expect me to take it. He thinks I'm he thinks I'm too soft. He's probably right. From what he told us last night about the place, I can imagine that it's very hard working under such conditions for large numbers. Imagine, Gina, what life is like without electricity. No dishwashing machine, no automatic washing machine, everything done by hand. You wouldn't like it because you've always been accustomed to the best equipment, both at home and at work. So you think I'm soft too? Complained Gina. I think you wouldn't like working in such conditions, said Deleuze. Then I think I'll go. Just to prove to you as well as to Captain Fox that I can work under those conditions. Honestly, to hear you both talk, you'd think I'm incapable of hard work. Well, I'll show you, and him too, that I'm not a spoiled little cat, flared Gina, her eyes sparkling like topazes. Oh dear, is that what he called you? Asked Dulles with a chuckle of delight. He's not a bit like Oliver, is he? No, he isn't. Not one little bit, grated Gina through clenched teeth. Oh man. Oh. I went for the 1 hour and 49 minutes. 1 hour and 41 minutes. Woohoo! Done. Ugh. Nobody's watching, but it's okay. I did it.